Hello and welcome to How Not to Play, the channel where I play Magic badly. So today we're going to cover a concept that isn't necessarily exclusive to Magic the Gathering, and that is anger management. If you've seen my channel at all, you know that sometimes I can lose my temper when things go bad during a game of Magic. Uh, please remember that this is done for entertainment purposes only, showing you how not to play. During an in person game or event, it is important to always keep your cool. Not only will this make you a better Magic player in general, but losing your temper during an event is a good way to lose face with your playgroup, alienate your friends, or possibly even get yourself banned from your local gaming establishment. None of which you want to happen. So there are many things within a game of Magic that can trigger an angry response, aside from simply losing the game. Getting a bad draw from the arena shuffler or off the top of your deck if you're in person. Having to mulligan perhaps multiple times to find a usable starting hand. Getting mana screwed by not drawing enough lands, or potentially worse, getting flooded by drawing every land in your deck. Certain problematic cards, for example, Shoulder the Apocalypse, or any other cards that can come to dominate whatever format you're playing. Even entire archetypes can sometimes seem oppressive or insurmountable, like control decks. And then there's my own personal Achilles heel, my own misplays. Because, I mean, when it comes down to it, those are 100% preventable. It's important to learn that feeling, that tickle of anger creeping in when your vision starts to go red, when steam pours out of your ears and you open up your mouth to shout curses at the magic gods. First of all, make sure that what comes out of your mouth is not an expletive. Catch yourself and alter your language. You've already got that burst of air coming out. Instead of saying, God, motherfucking piece of horse, mother trash, just calm yourself down. Instead, say something like, well, that's unfortunate, and close your mouth. After all, that's what's going to get you in the most trouble in the moment. Don't throw your cards on the table in frustration. Calmly set them down. Fold your hands in your lap. Close your eyes and just breathe for a minute. It's important to take this moment to distract yourself from whatever it is that just happened to rouse your ire. Count your breaths. In, out is a very good distraction. Perhaps doing some mental math by doubling numbers, 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, whatever. My personal favorite is the Fibonacci series. Or perhaps reciting lines from your favorite movie or song, or whatever works best for you. Just get your mind off of what happened for just a minute. Your opponent can wait for you to get your head back into the game, and then you'll be able to come back at it without that anger over your head. You can focus on what's happening and perhaps dig yourself out of it. Perhaps not immediately at the table, but it is important to analyze your anger, to figure out what exactly happened to cause you to get angry and what you might be able to do to prevent that situation from happening in the future. Most Magic players carry around a notebook to keep track of life totals throughout the game. This is a good habit to get into the practice of, not only for keeping track of life totals, but also because it can help with your anger management as well. If something happens during the game to trigger your rage, write it down. Mana screwed, write it down. Mana flooded, write it down. Sheoldred, write it down. Atraxa, write it down. Counter spells, write it down. And then later, when you can look back on all of the games you've played recently with that deck, perhaps you'll see a pattern forming. If you consistently see mana screw, mana screw, mana screw, mana flood, mana flood, mana flood, perhaps look at adjusting your mana base within your deck to help correct this problem. And it is important to focus on the problem, not the person. Do not personalize your anger. Arena is not out to get you. There is no shuffler conspiracy. Your opponent is not a piece of shit for playing a control deck. Oh, okay, well, maybe they are. But it's important to instead recognize that your deck is weak to counter spells and to start playing around that. Recognize when your opponent is most likely to play a counter, what spells they are likely to play those counters against, and perhaps play something less critical to draw that counter spell out so that your opponent no longer has it. Invest in Cavern of Souls, a land that makes creatures uncounterable, or other effects like that that can help combat your deck's weaknesses to control decks. But above all, keep your conversations civil and respectful. You may be screaming at your opponent in your head for ruining your plans, but instead of, God, not another counterspell, try, wow, that was a good play, or you really got me with that one. Above all, recognize that interaction in the form of counterspells or removal is just part of the game. Also, part of the game is just pure random chance. Sometimes your opponent draws all the interaction in their deck. Sometimes they don't draw any. So that is a factor as well. And just because they are loaded up on removal this game doesn't mean that the next game will be the same. One of the best tools in your arsenal to combat problems with anger management is recognizing things that you can't control and things that you can control that might help mitigate the things that you can't. For example, you can't control the 7 cards that you draw in your opening hand. What you can control, however, is whether or not to mulligan that opening hand. You can't control how many lands you draw. Some games, you'll draw every land in your deck. Some games, you'll struggle just to draw your first 3. You can't really control that. What you can control is how much land fixing you include in your deck when you are creating it. Put in Evolving Wilds to help fix your colors. Put in Mana Dorks to help ramp you into your higher end plays. There is plenty of land fixing in Magic the Gathering, even in most limited environments. So be sure to include some amount of land fixing to help combat Mana Flood, Mana Screw, or perhaps even mana sinks that can utilize extra mana that you have, even if you have no other plays. Along the same lines, you can't control what cards you draw off the top of your deck. Maybe you are in dire needs of a removal spell. You cannot control whether or not that removal spell is on top. What you can control is the amount of draw spells that you have in your deck. And not just straight draw, also scrying, surveilling, all of these other mechanics help you fix the top of your deck. This card advantage is important to help fix the problem of not drawing what you need when you need it. You can't control what bomb rares your opponent plays. They might have Shieldred on 4 every game. They might have built their deck to ensure that they have Shieldred on 4 every game. You can't control that. What you can control is how much removal you put in your deck. Make sure that you have, for example, a counter spell if you're in blue, or a kill spell if you're in black. Green has fight spells. White has exile effects. Red has straight up burn. Whatever color you're in, put in the removal that you need to counteract whatever bomb rares your opponent might be playing. On the same lines, your opponent might be playing a lot of interactive spells, like those removal spells, to take out your own bomb rares. And just understand that they're going to be doing that, just like you are. You can't control what interaction spells they use. They might be on a counterspell control plan. What you can control, though, is your own interaction. Uh, if you're playing blue, you can bring in counter spells to counter their counter spells. You could even alter your own play style. If they have a mana sink that is going to counter your spell unless you pay 2 or 4 extra mana, something like that, then just wait until you have that extra mana to spend before you play your big spells. And ultimately, you can't control what deck your opponent brings to the event. If you find that everybody's bringing control decks, well, then maybe you can control what deck type you bring. As we saw in our concepts videos, control decks are notoriously weak against aggro decks. Build yourself a mono red, low to the ground aggro deck and just wipe the floor with any control matchup you meet. If your opponents are on aggro a lot, then build yourself a mid-range deck to stop the initial aggro push and just dominate them with big monsters. If your opponents are mostly on mid-range, big late game stuff, then maybe build yourself a control deck to just do it better. Each deck has its own inherent weaknesses, simply by the type of deck that it is. It's important that you build your decks that are able to combat the metagame, which would be whatever decks your opponents are likely to bring. And so keep that in mind as you're building, and you'll be better prepared to control the things that you can't and to stop that anger from flaring up to begin with. Nothing really pisses me off more than building a deck and it just getting squashed left and right. But honestly, it's okay to lose. It's okay to be competitive. It's okay to want to win, and it's okay to be angry when you don't. The trick is to learn when to let this competitive spirit out and how to let it out. Being passionate about the game of Magic is a wonderful trait, but take care not to be too intense or confrontational in your interactions. Because even intense excitement when things are going well can turn off your fellow players and make them not want to play against you. Sometimes you'll draw exactly the card that you need, and you will just throw it down on the table, scream your victory to the world. But don't rush your plays. Don't be throwing your cards around the table, even in those moments of pure excitement. You need to be patient and make sure that you're making the correct play. Because the last thing you want is for your glorious victory to come crashing down in defeat by either misclicking something on Arena or failing to read your opponent's combat trick if they're sitting there with mana open. You throw your big creature down that's about to win you the game, and you throw it right into a counterspell. So be patient. Don't rush into your plays. Even if you're winning, stop, think about it, make sure you're playing optimally, because losing to my own misplays is one of the best ways to ruin my day. It's also very important to remember in the game of Magic that even though you are trying to defeat your opponent, the opponent is not your enemy. Most often, they are your friends, and they're trying to enjoy this game too, a game that you both love to play. If something happens during the game and you're not exactly sure what happened or how you lost, it's okay to ask your opponent. Who better to show you the weaknesses of your deck than the person that just exploited them? Most people will give honest advice when you ask them, because helping you grow as a player will help them grow as a player as well. It's also important to accept the reality of the game. Magic is a game of random chance. Yes, there is a lot of skill involved, and that's what this whole concept series is about, is teaching you those skills to help improve your game. But the fact is, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. Sometimes your deck just hates you. Sometimes you get mana screwed even though you have land fixers. Sometimes you don't draw your removal even though you have it in your deck. Magic is a game of random chance. Even the current world champion, Jean-Emmanuel Depras, only had an overall 59% win rate for the season. That's not a lot when you consider that just random chance will give you a 50% win rate on its own. And it's very important to accept that not all losses could be prevented. I know it's cliche and you hear it all the time, but try looking at the glass half full. It's easy to identify the things that go wrong or the things that just really piss you off. But what parts of the game went right? Don't be afraid to write down those positive moments too. Had removal for Shieldred, ramped into big stuff perfectly. When you write down the things that your deck does well, then you are able to better capitalize on those strengths in the future. But if you find that you're getting burnt out on a deck that always loses to Shieldred or always loses to counter magic, there's no shame in taking some time off. Even if you are trying to figure out how to make this specific deck better, sometimes taking a little time off, go over your notes, come back with fresh eyes is going to be better than constantly beating your head against a wall of Shieldreds and counter magic. Maybe if a particular deck type is frustrating you, play that deck yourself. Will help you learn that particular archetype's strengths, and most importantly, that particular archetype's weaknesses, that you can then build your deck better to exploit those weaknesses. But probably the most important piece of advice I could give you is to be forgiving. Even if you don't catch yourself in time, forgive yourself for making that outburst. Apologize to your opponent and your playgroup for exploding like that. Let them know that you're aware that you have this anger problem and that you're working on it. And above all, forgive yourself for getting angry. It's only natural when things go wrong that you feel that anger. And that's why I've made this video, to let you know that it's okay to be angry. It's what you do with it that matters. Use that anger to create a better deck, to create a better play style, to create a better you. So please take it from somebody who has anger management issues. Trust me, it's not easy to get a hold of your anger. It takes time. It takes a concentrated effort and incredible willpower. But it can be done. Identify what triggers make you the most angry. Analyze your anger to figure out what you might be able to do to lessen those triggers in the future. Focus on the problem. Focus on the deck, on the cards, on the archetypes that are making you angry, not the person playing them. Fix those things that you can. Put in land fixing, put in removal, put in interaction, but ignore what you can't. Sometimes your deck just hates you. You don't draw what you need. You might have it in your deck, but it just doesn't show up. If you can't fix it, ignore it, because there's nothing you can do about it. And there is no sense in getting yourself pissed off over something you can't control. Not all games are winnable. But it's okay to be competitive. It's okay to want to win. And when you don't, communicate with your opponent. Figure out where things went wrong, what you could have done to win that game. Sometimes your opponent's hand is just stacked and you have no chance at all. But sometimes your opponent might say, if you would have played a different spell there, I would have countered it regardless of what spell you played. So if you would have played a different spell, you could have kept your Shieldred. Or if you had this removal for Shieldred on 4, I had nothing else going for me, I wouldn't have been able to beat you. So communicating with your opponent might even help you find those glass half full moments. They might say, when you played your ramp on 2, I knew that I was dead because there's nothing I can do against a giant dino on 3. When you get your combo off perfectly, when you ramp into your big stuff, when you remove your opponent's key threats. Those are those glass half full moments that you need to be mindful of. That, yes, your deck does work. It does do what it wants to do, even though there are some times when it doesn't. And most importantly, be forgiving. Not just to your opponent who is playing that piece of shit control deck, but be forgiving to yourself for getting angry. Yes, you're trying to work on it. You're trying to not get so pissed off every time some little thing goes wrong, but it's going to happen. You're going to slip up every now and then. When you do, apologize to your playgroup. Let them know that you are working on this issue. And above all, forgive yourself for getting angry. It's only natural, it's only human, and you're trying to work on it. And that's what matters. So thank you for watching this video. I know it's a little different from what I normally do, but I think it is important to get out there that this can be a problem. Especially when you watch my channel and see me go rage on arena conspiracies and whatnot. That is not acceptable behavior. When you are in a live event with your friends, it's important to keep calm, to keep your cool, and to try to become a better Magic player by working on those times when the game just pisses you off. So please go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to my channel for more content, laugh at me getting mad at all the little things that I shouldn't be getting mad at, and I'll see you all in the next video.